Before There we go. Before joining the OPI, I spent 15 years teaching special education as a grades 11, 12 case manager, and I was also the pre-employment transition services coordinator for our school. So if you have questions about that, I can also address some of those. My colleague, Ann Carpenter, is a program support specialist for the special education department, and she is also the state CSPD director and creates professional development opportunities for educators, administrators, and families in MTSS and special education. And she will be monitoring the chat today to help answer your questions. So I'm very grateful for that. Um, as far as questions go, during the presentation today, if you have general questions about how to apply the information, please ask those in the chat during the presentation. I'll do my best to stop and answer those, but I promise you, if it's not during, we'll address it afterwards or via email. If you have questions about a specific student, please hold those questions until the end of the training or email me afterwards. I will be out of the office for a couple of weeks, but if you email me tonight or tomorrow, I will do my very best to respond before I leave. Otherwise, I'll get back to you as soon as possible during the week of October 20th. Furthermore, if you enjoy today's session and you want to learn more, please consider attending this upcoming conference. The schedule hasn't been released yet, but I hope to offer a deeper dive into the topics that we'll cover today. Keynote speakers for this conference are Alicia Anderson. She's a business owner, adaptive exercise specialist, a speaker and advocate. As well as Haley Moss, who is a neurodiversity expert, a lawyer, an author, and an advocate. If you've attended this conference before, please share in the chat what you liked or what you gained from it, as your insights might help others decide if they would like to attend. And today we're going to talk really about why, well, the basis of it is why transition planning matters. I've just put 4 things here. There's way more, but 4 things we'll touch on. Supporting students' futures. A transition planning prepares students with disabilities for life after high school, for college, for training, employment, independent living, and community participation. It ensures that students develop the skills and experiences and the supports that they need to achieve their goals. The legal requirements, well, IDEA requires transition services to begin no later than age 16, earlier if appropriate, and the recommendation really is to start much earlier than 16. Schools must provide a coordinated set of activities that are individualized, measurable, and student-driven, and that's really what we're going to dive into today. Improved outcomes. Students that engage in meaningful transition planning are more likely to graduate. It's that what they're going to do afterwards to help motivate them to pursue further education, to secure employment. It takes kind of the fear out of graduation that some students can have. And early planning helps reduce those gaps between school services and adult services. Student voice. Transition planning places the student at the center of the IEP and encourages self-determination, advocacy, and independence. Here we go. So, any questions so far? All right, I can see you, Anne. You're the only person I can see. So if there's a question, I'll be looking at you for this. Thank you. We're rolling. We're going to start right at the top of the transition IEP and see what we can get through today. When we talk about transition planning, there are a few key things that you need to remember. First, the transition plan must be in place by the student's 16th birthday. And once a student has a transition IEP, they must always have one. There's no going back to the other kind of IEP. Second, the student must be invited to the IEP meeting. Make sure that the student's file and the IEP include evidence that they were invited to the meeting where transition planning was discussed. And that can be the special education meeting notice, the contact log. There'll be some slides later where we'll address that a little bit more, but that's very, very important. Is once you have a transition IEP, you always have one. And the student, if you have a transition IEP, they must always be invited to that meeting because it's to discuss their future. And finally, the IEP must include a coordinated set of activities that's designed to help the student move from school towards their post-school goals, whether that's further education, employment, or independent living. IDEA. You're going to see a few slides of this today. And I included slides with the IDEA law because I want you to see where this is coming from, and especially from a compliance monitoring aspect, why we have to include the things that we do in the IEP. So the IDEA tells us that the IEP must include measurable post-secondary goals that are based on age-appropriate transition assessment. That means there has to be a link between the results of your transition assessments and your measurable post-secondary goal. It must be based on that. And it must focus on education, training, employment, and when needed, independent living skills. The IEP also must include transition services. This includes the course of study and the transition services needed. These are designed to help the student reach their post-secondary goals, to help them achieve those. So we're looking at building skills. So the IEP isn't just about current support. The transition IEP plans ahead to adult life with clear goals and services to help students reach those goals. Okay, this IDEA mentions this coordinated set of activities. And a coordinated set of activities in the context of a transition IEP refers to a group of planned, organized activities that are designed to help that student move from school to post-school life. These activities are tied to the student's post-secondary goals and can include instruction, work experiences, community participation, daily living skills, and related services. The key is they work together. They're coordinated. So they work together to support that student's transition from high school to after high school, rather than being an isolated experience or a random experience. They're all designed to work together. The purpose is to focus on the results. Improving academic and functional skills to support success in their post-secondary education, integrated employment, or adult services like independent living and community participation. If you look at number 2 on here, you can see that IDEA is very specific, that this needs to be based on the student's individual needs and their strengths, preferences, and interests. To help me remember those 4 things that are required to be in there, I kind of switched the letters around. I don't know if you can see the mouse. Can you see the mouse on here? Yes? Okay. So you see the word needs, and then we have strengths, preferences, and interests, the way that it's written. I look at a lot of files. So to help me remember those 4 things I'm looking for, I switch those letters around and make the word SNP. So I have strengths, needs, interests, and preferences. Does that make sense? So somewhere when we're looking for, when we get to the transition assessments, I'll show you how I use that SNP just to kind of make sure that that information is included in there. Activities include instruction, related services, community experiences. And if you see here on B, it does include transition services can be specifically designed instruction, or it can be a related service to help the student benefit from their education. But the key takeaway is transition services are personalized, goal-driven, and practical to help bridge school life to adult life. The first section of a transition IEP, you guys may recognize desired
Desiree,
post-school
sorry to
activity.
interrupt you.
Yeah. Mhm.
Before you get too far, somebody has asked if you'll be showing examples.
I won't be necessarily showing examples today, but I would be happy to meet with that person if we need examples at the end. We can talk about those.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And whoever that is out there, I got you. I will make sure that you do get examples. Okay, so our first section, the very first box of where the transition IEP starts is the desired post-school activities. And this is where we start. This statement drives the transition IEP process. So we try to address the information that is in the parentheses. And you'll see it's post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, continuing and adult education, adult services, independent living, or community participation. I read those all to you because there's a lot of different areas that you can hit on in this box. What if we don't know, right? What if we have the students that says IDK? It's very common. And if you're in a crunch, start with what the student does know and then be prepared to help them explore. So I would ask the student about their preferences. Do you like working indoors or outdoors? Do they like working with people or do they prefer to work independently? Do they plan to live at home or do they want to live on their own or with their friends? So it's a common misperception that you just write the career that the student wants to pursue in this box, but it's really much more than that. This is a statement that we're going to be able to look at and go, okay, here's what they want to do. Here's the information that we have now. When a student isn't sure about what they want to do after high school, transition planning should focus on exploration and discovery. We use transition assessments, surveys, hands-on experiences like job shadowing, internships, volunteering, community-based activities to help them identify their interests and build skills. Especially if you have a student that's not really sure what they would like to do after graduation and you're doing these activities with them, just make sure to document the activities in the IEP and actively involve the student in the planning process so that it's meaningful and really student-centered. When writing the student statement of desired post-school activities, remember that it should reflect what the student wants to do after high school and not what the parents or other educational professionals think. The statement drives the IEP and sets the direction for transition planning. This box, the desired post-school activities, is not the place to document age-appropriate transition assessments that were given to the student. So while those assessments might help you learn what the student wants to do, those results should not be included here. A best practice that promotes both compliance and student engagement is to write the statement in first person. Here's a very simple yet thorough statement of a desired post-school activity. After graduation, I want to go to cosmetology school and live in an apartment with my friend. From there, we'll be able to assess the student and where they're at. How are they prepared for training to attend cosmetology school? Their education, are they prepared academically? What skills does the student have to live in an apartment with their friend? That all will be included in the assessment piece that we're going to take a look at next. Any questions on the statement of desired post-school activities? Sometimes I see paragraphs of information in this box, but it's really just a few sentences about what the student wants to do after school. Next, we move into age-appropriate transition assessments. This is the foundation of the entire planning process because it gives us that information about the student's strengths, needs, interests, and preferences. Information that you will collect in this section helps the IEP team write meaningful post-secondary goals. Remember, they have to be based on these results. Plan strategies and supports, choose classes that the student will take, and help evaluate whether transition services have been effective. Training assessments, well, there's four areas of the results of age-appropriate transition assessments: training, education, employment, and independent living. And I often get questions about what goes where. So we'll start with that. So training assessments show if a student is ready to participate in like on-the-job training after high school. That's just one type of training we could look at. They assess interests and preferences, work habits, soft skills, hands-on skills, and like any needed supports, like accommodations or coaching that the student may benefit from to participate in that. Education assessments focus on readiness for post-secondary education, whether that's a trade school or a university or local classes. They look at a student's current academic skills and study habits, self-advocacy. We can address learning style and college readiness skills like applications. Are they prepared to fill out financial aid or navigate a campus? Would they be able to get around independently? The goal is to identify strengths and areas needing support while the student is still in school. Employment assessments assess readiness for work after high school. They examine career interests or work habits, social skills, communication skills, job-specific skills, independent work skills, and any support that they might need. The goal is to match the student's strengths to possible jobs and identify any needed supports the student may benefit from to be successful. Independent living assessments measure a student's readiness to live independently. They include daily living skills, money management, community navigation, leisure and social skills, safety, problem solving, support needs. The goal is to identify strengths and areas for growth so that the IEP team can plan meaningful independent living goals and services. Essentially, when we are looking at results, you start with the information that you already have in relation to what the student wants to do. So we started with that first box, their statement of desired post-school activities, what they want to do, and then we start to gather the information that we have and of where they're at now and what they will need to get to where they want to be. When you're selecting an assessment, it's important to know like what information do we have today and what information could we benefit from knowing to help the student plan for the future. A few key points about assessments. Age appropriate means the student's actual age, not their developmental age. Assessments can be formal or informal, but at least one should be a formal tool. And we'll talk about that more on the next slide. Somewhere within these results, if you look at this box as a big picture, somewhere in one of the sections, there's four, but somewhere in one of the sections, you need to identify the student's strengths, needs, interests, and preferences. So that's kind of a hot tip for you as after you've completed your results section, just go through and scan to make sure that you can find all four of those things. The IEP must also show clear evidence that assessment results were used to develop each post-secondary goal. And that can trip people up a little bit because we tend to know a lot about our students if we are working with them frequently. So we may know the information, but it's important to document. If the student is planning to attend trade school for welding, make sure that your results section provide that information to show what his strengths are, how ready he is, and what he needs to learn while he's in school. Assessments must be updated every year. It's a best practice to note the name of the assessment and the date that it was given so that you have that clear evidence that assessment results were used to develop the goals and that they're updated annually. And finally, assessments for education, training, and employment are required for every student, regardless of the disability severity. Districts must complete all of the required assessments. They can't be skipped, even if a student has poor attendance. We are required to ensure that each of those assessment areas have been given. Independent living assessments are not always required. They really only need to be done if the IEP team decides that they're appropriate. The team considers whether the student already has the skills to live independently or if we need more information to write an independent living goal. However, independent living is much more than self-care, like dressing or feeding. It also includes things like managing money, getting around the community, spending free time, and being involved in community activities, which, if you think about it, really can apply to most every student that is in high school. Assessing a student's post-secondary transition needs isn't just about asking them what they want to do after high school. To create a realistic and achievable plan, we have to understand the strengths, needs, interests, preferences, SNP. We also need to choose assessments with the student in mind. So think about what information you need to plan effectively. And use a mix of formal and informal assessments to get the full picture. And I told you I would talk about formal and informal assessments. So formal versus informal. I've had people ask if formal meant you paid for it. And it's not just about purchasing. You can purchase informal assessments too. So don't use that as the criteria. Formal assessments are standardized tools that have clear rules for administering them and scoring them. They give you objective, data-driven results and a comparison to their peers. Examples include psychological or achievement tests, district tests, statewide assessments, adaptive behavior scales, transcripts, or attendance records. And that's often overlooked, but that is a comparison to peers. Our informal assessments are less structured and they don't offer a peer comparison. They do give insight into the student's unique strengths, their needs and preferences. These can include input from the student, their parents, teachers, or employers. Examples are interviews, like a personal interview, observations, either conducted at home by the parent or by the employer, or even in the classroom, daily living assessments, surveys, and any other kind of employer evaluation. And that can be for volunteer employment, like observations that were made as the student was working in a volunteer environment. But the key is just combining formal and informal assessments um, to ensure that that transition plan is well-rounded and that it's personalized to the student. If you have a favorite assessment that you use with students, please drop it in the chat to share with others. And before we move on, does anyone have any questions about um, age-appropriate assessments and how to like apply that information to this section?
Desiree, I had plugged into the chat a link for the transition binder.
Thank you.
And that had in there, there were a couple of questions about what types of assessments are recommended and that kind of a thing. And just there are some, we like the word free, and those are available within that transition binder. There's a listing of them there.
Yes, thank you, John. And in that list, I did try to sort them out a little bit, but you'll find that one assessment might fill the needs of training and employment. So you can use the results in more than one area. Really, when determining, like, I can't really recommend an assessment or even a set of assessments without knowing what you're assessing for. So it really comes down to what information do you still need to gather for the student? What information could help the team determine what instruction or activities would help the student prepare? Um, does that clarify? This is an area that we could really have a lot of fun with talking about specific students. So maybe at the end, if you have a student an assessment that you're looking for, let me know and I'd be happy to help you find that. Okay, if there's no questions right now. We are going to move on to post-secondary goals. So measurable post-secondary goals in the IEP describe a student's long-term plans and aspirations for after high school. They are central to transition planning because they help everyone understand what the student wants to do as a young adult. These goals provide a roadmap for reaching long-term plans because they can guide educational decisions and supports until the student earns a diploma or exits special education. And we will talk about how to write measurable post-secondary goals in a couple of slides. So post-secondary means after high school. Measurable post-secondary goals must state an adult outcome of what the student will do after leaving high school. And this has been a high area of non-compliance in that it's not an area to write what the student is going to do while they're in high school. It's very, IDEA is very clear. These must be written for after high school. Like the annual IEP goals, a post-secondary goal must reflect a measurable outcome, not a process or an activity. For example, if you have a student that plans to attend college, writing a measurable post-secondary goal stating that the student will attend college is a measurable outcome. Stating that the student plans to is a hope and a dream, and it's not measurable. To qualify as measurable, post-secondary goals must be observable and countable and written so that they can be met or not met. Did they do it or did they not? Statements that indicate what the student will do rather than wants or plans indicate measurable post-secondary goals. Wants and plans are not observable or measurable outcomes. So when we're looking at the student that will attend college, that is a measurable outcome. We can check that as yes, he did, or no, he didn't. And it's the end the outcome that we want, not the process or activity. And what I mean by that is if you were to write that the student will apply for college, that's an activity that's part of the process to get to the outcome. So it's not a measurable post-secondary goal. The transition IEP must also contain evidence that each post-secondary goal is based on findings from age-appropriate transition assessments conducted with the student, and that it matches with their identified strengths, needs, interests, and preferences. A post-secondary goal for education and training is required for all students, regardless of the severity of their disability. A post-secondary goal for employment is required for all students, regardless of the severity of the student's disability. For the post-secondary goal for employment, a best practice is to write a goal that aligns with the student's intended career and not a short-term job that they will have immediately following high school, if that's possible. A post-secondary goal for independent living is not required unless it's deemed appropriate by the IEP team. The IEP team determines that a post-secondary goal for independent living skills is unnecessary. It is a best practice to indicate, based on assessment data, no goal is needed. Post-secondary goals must be reviewed annually and updated if necessary until they graduate or exit special education. And on the next slide, we're going to look at writing them. Here we go. So the first step is to consider the student's vision of their future, what they would like to do. So that's step one. Consider what the student would like to do after high school. Two is to refer to the results of the age-appropriate transition assessments to identify their, again, student strengths, needs, interests, and preferences. And you use the information gathered from the transition assessments to assist the student in forming measurable post-secondary goals that align with their desired post-school activity. Starting with after high school is a good way to ensure that the goal is written for after high school. The goal is measurable when it contains the observable outcome that can be counted as yes, it's done, or no, it's not complete. Remember, hopes to and plans are not measurable. And finally, review the goal to ensure that it's meaningful to the student, because that's really what counts the most. Does the goal reflect the student's interests and preferences? And was information from age-appropriate transition assessments used to develop that goal? Does anyone have any questions on writing measurable post-secondary goals? They don't have to be fancy, and it's preferred if they're a one-liner. Okay. Next up is course of study. The course of study should prepare the student to graduate with the needed prerequisites to participate in their identified goals for employment, education and training, and independent living. Avoid using the word elective as much as possible, and instead select, even if you can't have the schedule written out, or I'm sorry, all of the courses written out exactly, because as we know, schedules change. Sometimes they're not developed until after our IEPs are written. But you can identify what type of classes the student should take based on their needs that are identified in the results of the transition assessment, and what they would like to do after high school. Must cover the duration of the IEP. When we're writing IEPs, we usually start with the course, the classes that the student is in that semester, and then plan the next 2 semesters so that it covers the entire duration of the IEP. Here's what this looks like in the IEP. Course of study indicates the anticipated graduation date and the credits that the student has earned thus far, and the credits that the student will need to earn in order to graduate. And this is not automatically inputted. You will have to go in and enter this information. But in light of the recent judgment and students, special education programming for students 19 to 22, I encourage you to ensure that the information that is on the course of study that's listed here is accurate. Do anybody have questions on course of study? Going good? Okay. The next section of the transition IEP is transition services needed. Transition services are supports, activities, and instruction that are designed to help the student with disabilities move successfully from school to adult life. These are based on the student's strengths, needs, interests, and preferences, and results from the age-appropriate transition assessments. So back in that area where we were documenting results from assessments, you should have identified needs within that section of services or activities or instruction that the student will benefit from while they're in high school. So here's where we put what they're going to work on while they're in high school to help them make progress, reasonable progress towards their post-secondary goals. Who would kind of like a breakdown of what each one of these sections includes? Okay, Ronnie, this is for you. So for instruction, I like to ask, what instruction will the student need to learn in order to gain the skills necessary to achieve their post-secondary goal? Instruction can occur in the school, or this can occur in a community setting. But really, what do they need to be taught? What should they be taught? What should they work on in order to learn the skills? Employment is what instruction or experiences will the student need to achieve their post-secondary goal? So how will the student learn or develop work-related behaviors and learn the work skills necessary to help them attain their employment goal? Will the student participate in career exploration or an internship or a paid work experience? Do they need instruction on resumes? Or will they develop a job portfolio? Do they need training to develop skills such as interviewing or time management or customer service? Community experiences are what experiences will the student need to enable them to meet their post-secondary goal? What opportunities will assist the student in career exploration or learning more about post-secondary education? Are there community experiences that the student can engage in that will help them develop workplace skills? Post-school adult living includes what the student might need to learn or do to help them prepare for adulthood. Examples of post-school adult living include registering to vote, renting a home, applying for college, buying a car, banking, or understanding medical benefits. Related services in this area include what adult services can support the student to achieve their post-secondary goals. Examples include an evaluation for assistive technology or a consultation with a disability resource center at a college. Daily living skills. What skills does a student need to learn that will allow the student to live as independently as possible? This includes the development of self-determination and self-advocacy skills that develop a student's ability to make choices about where they're going to live, learn, work, and where they will recreate in their community. The functional and vocational assessment are the assessments that maybe you didn't get to. Maybe you as you were going through the results and working on the transition plan, you identified more information that you need to get. You need to learn more about the student in an area. So here is where you can list the functional vocational assessments, any of the transition assessments that the student should receive or be administered in the upcoming year. Examples include career aptitude tests, task analysis, achievement tests, interest inventories, personality tests, or employability tests, anything that will give you more information about that. I've also see like the ASVAB can provide a lot of information on careers, and that might be an assessment that your students are taking that would benefit your student for their transition plan. Transition services may include facilitating student referrals to outside agencies. And we're going to talk about that in another section. Just note that here, if you can see my mouse, here is where you are writing the instruction, the experience, whatever that they will benefit from here. Then you have the person or agency responsible, and we're going to talk about inviting outside agencies, but I just wanted you to note that while we're looking at this, we are required by IDEA to help make connections for our students with outside agencies. However, we cannot commit another agency to providing services without the involvement or approval of that agency. So it's really important that you are not listing a person or agency as responsible for paying for or providing services if they haven't been included. They must consent to that before you list them here. Or if in general, if it's a non-compliant, if there is an agency listed here and they haven't been included or invited, and that they would have to be removed because this is a legal contract. It's a legal document. So just remember here, that's very important that you're only listing persons or agencies responsible that have participated and that they consent. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have a question.
Sure.
Where would you put, because I noticed somebody else does it too. They involve pre-ets,
Yes.
I usually put it in, do I put that in the vocational area or the
Well,
post?
that's a great question, Ronnie. And what it really amounts to is who is actually providing. So it really depends on what the experience is that you've noted, and who is providing that. So if, for example, you have a pre-ets contract and you have students in your classroom and you're providing some services to them, like you're teaching them how to write the resume. Does this sound familiar, right? You're the
Yes,
one that's
that's what
providing
I'm
it.
the one who's doing it.
Yes, if you're the one doing it, Ronnie, you're the one who is responsible. You're the person or agency responsible. If
Right.
a pre-ed specialist was coming into the classroom and providing that information, or even like in the community, if the pre-ed specialist provided that service, then
Mhm.
you would write them here. And then I hope that they're like invited and participating in the IEP meeting. Where this gets confusing is we have that providing or paying for piece, right? And we
Right.
consider Priettes is paying for the services. However, if you flip it a little bit in your head, this will help it make more sense. Priettes doesn't pay for it first, they reimburse you for it. So the
Right.
school is actually paying for it and providing it, and then Priettes is reimbursing it. So
So,
if
but it's
that
okay that it's okay that I put it as a transition service needed or whatever to join it, because I'm
you
really
you can
driving.
yeah, in this section here, you can list what the student is doing and you can list that as a pre-ETS activity. Just make
Okay.
sure that you're mindful about who's providing it.
Yeah,
And
I always put
yeah,
me. I don't put anybody else. So
you got it. Yes. So you certainly can acknowledge pre-ETS services in this section.
okay.
Does anybody else have questions about that? Okay. And so we've talked about what this looks like. Just transition services must be specific. They must be specific and individualized for the student, addressing the unique needs of the student to help them reach their post-secondary goals. They should not include services that all students receive, like access to counseling center. Transition services must be provided to meet the individual needs of each eligible student and offering the same set of services to all students without basing them on the results of their transition assessments and their needs can amount to a denial of FAPE. The transition services needed should be as individualized as the rest of the IEP. In the section for transition services needed, if we back up here, if the team determines that one of these areas is not needed, you can check the box, discuss not needed. Don't leave an entire line blank, or that does amount to non-compliance. I think I just lost my thought on the discuss not needed. Oh, here we go. This was the other thing I wanted to tell you. Remember, when we looked at the IDEA law, it's required that the transition IEP contain transition services needed. So that is the requirement, that it must contain transition services needed. So if we went through and checked every box, discuss not needed, would that be compliant? No. Yes, good job. I saw you, Faith. You answered correctly. Yes. If they're all marked discuss not needed, then you haven't included transition services in the transition IEP. So do make sure that you include some, if not all. Okay. Any questions about transition services needed? If following the presentation, if anyone out there is like would love some examples of what transition services needed could look like, please email me and I would be happy to provide you with some resources. It's different for every student based on what they need. Here we go, inviting outside agencies. We just kind of touched on it a little bit. So looking at the law, under IDEA, the public agency must invite any participating agency that is likely to be responsible for providing or paying for transition services. IDEA also requires that the student be invited to attend the IEP meeting whenever the meeting will consider the student's post-secondary goals and the transition services needed to achieve those goals. So anytime you have a transition IEP, you must invite the student. The student's file must show evidence of the invitation. This can be done by documenting the invitation in the prior written notice, noting in the contact log, and checking the box on the meeting notice. However, just checking the box might not ensure that the student actually received the invitation. So a best practice is to send one notice to the parent or guardian and one directly to the student. Or you can note that in the PWN or the contact log that you personally invited the student. If the student does not attend the meeting, the district must take other steps to ensure that the student's strengths, needs, preferences, and interests are considered, and that this must be documented in the PWN. So when considering the need for post-secondary transition services and in outside agencies, when you identify transition services needed, the IEP team might also identify outside agencies or organizations that can assist to either provide transition services to the student to help them meet their post-secondary goals, or to connect the student and family to resources that will benefit them after high school. Outside agencies can bring so much knowledge and experience that can help create a meaningful transition plan and improve successful adult outcomes. Some agencies can even provide services before graduation. Examples of these agencies include Voc Rehab, the Department of Health and Family Services, Independent Living Centers, Montana Job Service, the Transportation Agency representative, or someone from the rec department, assistive technology representative, or a disability services representative from a post-secondary or technical school. If you live in an area where it's available, WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act program specialist, can be very useful on your IEP team. Each agency usually has a different eligibility criteria, and they might have waiting lists for services. Families can feel overwhelmed by the paperwork and the process of this. So part of transition planning is helping families know who they can call for support. It can be very helpful if one person is identified as like a single point of contact or a service coordinator from the agency for that family and other team members. This IDEA requires that schools identify all agencies likely to provide or pay for transition services and invite them to the IEP meeting. However, before contacting or inviting an agency, the district must obtain written consent from the parent or adult student. You can use the OPI consent to invite outside agencies for post-secondary transition services. There's a form in Infinite Campus. We're going to take a look at that on the next slide, and I'll show you where to specify the agency and obtain consent. It is really important to note, though, you must obtain new consent each time an agency representative attends the meeting. And the reason for that is we are discussing personal information that's sensitive for the student at the meeting. So you must get it each time prior to inviting them. Here are the two forms that we use. The form on the left is the consent to invite outside agency. And you can see there's a section where you list the agency to be invited. It is okay to leave the IEP meeting scheduled date blank if you have permission for like the next IEP meeting. You just would, if you have this signature captured and you have this form prepared for the IEP meeting, just be sure that when you reach out to the parent to schedule the meeting, that you're also talking to them about the agency coming and making sure that that is still okay, and including them on the special education meeting notice that you send to the family. Here on the IEP meeting notice, you can see who is invited to attend. If you have a student who, for a transition IEP, you want to make sure that you address the student box And other down here, you can list the outside agencies or other specialists. Once you have consent to invite the agency, um, once you have the written consent, you can reach out to the agency and invite them to the meeting via phone, um, and then send them a copy of this formal meeting notice in the mail. Any questions on inviting outside agencies? Okay.
Desiree, can you,
Yes.
what about if the parent invites the outside agency?
Mm. The parents, thank you, John. The parent is free to invite whomever they would like to come to the meeting. So if the parent invites an outside agency and now you have an outside agency at the meeting and you didn't have consent, that's okay because you didn't need it. But what should you do? Can anybody tell me? Ronnie, I saw you talking.
Have the form ready?
But you don't need consent if a parent brings someone. They've given their consent because they brought them along. But what you should do is document in the PWN that the parent invited the
Oh,
outside
yeah.
agency to the
Yeah.
meeting. Yep. And that way it's very clear where that invitation came from.
Can you just do it in the note or do you have to do it in the the
Um,
PWN?
John, is that a PWN specific or is it interchangeable? Could that go in the IEP notes?
I think it should be in the PWN first and foremost, if it carries over into the note section, because really the note section is really used very sparingly.
And then remember, the purpose of the PWN is to provide notice to the parents before that anything is implemented. So including it in that PWN ensures that that written notice is included
Right.
in that as well.
Okay.
The next section of the transition IEP is the transfer of rights. So looking at this law, age of majority and education decision-making in Montana. In Montana, when a student turns 18, they gain the right and responsibility to make certain legal choices unless those rights have been legally removed. Under IDEA, Montana is authorized to transfer educational decision-making rights to the student at the age of majority, which is 18. At this point, the student becomes responsible for their educational program and all the rights previously held by the parent transfer to the student. In some cases, a court may appoint a guardian, either the parent or another appropriate individual to make educational decisions on behalf of the student. This is done through a legal process through the court system. And if guardianship is sought, parents may wish to consult an attorney to complete the process, or we have uh, a brochure on alternatives to guardianship. And Anne, I forgot to give you a link to that. If somebody else can, John, if you can find that, or Crystal or Jillian, and throw that in the chat, that would be great. Beginning no later than 1 year before the student reaches 18, the school must provide notice to both the student and the parents or legal guardian of the transfer of rights. The student's IEP must include a statement that the student has been informed of the rights that will transfer to him or her at the age of 18. And in the Montana IEP, we have a box for this. It used to be that once the date was entered in the IEP, that date would automatically input the date in each subsequent IEP from the student record. We've been informed by districts that this is not always happening, so it's really important to review this section every time you draft the IEP. The OPI recommends using the transfer of rights forms for parents and student and documenting the discussion in the PWN. I've linked the OPI transfer of rights brochure to this. However, I don't know if you'll be able to open the link, so I will put links to this for you. Or Carrie Tarter, if you are on today, if you can link the Alternatives to Guardianship Toolkit and that information from the Rural Institute, I would appreciate that.
Love it.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so happy to have a big team on here today. Okay, this form, again, this is not required, but it is highly, highly recommended to provide documentation of the given notice, especially if it's not automatically inputting. It's really nice to have these forms in the student file that you can go back and ensure that the date is in there. And again, when you have the discussion about the transfer of rights, make sure you document that discussion in the PWN. Key points, timing. Parents and guardians and the student must be informed of the transfer of rights before the student turns 17. But the best practice is to address this at the very first transition IEP meeting to provide the family with ample time for planning. And to discuss it at every IEP meeting thereafter so that families have time to plan for this. Document the discussion. Remember to enter the dates in the IEP section and include copies of the form letters in the student record. At the IEP meeting, when the parent approves and signs the IEP, then both the parent and student have officially been notified that the student will become an adult at age of 18. Early notification ensures compliance. It provides families time to explore guardianship or support options, and it documents that the student and parent are informed. Any questions on transfer of rights? Other considerations. Other things to think about when we're doing a transition IEP.
Desiree, somebody asked
Yes.
a PWN or note. So I'm not sure what you were mentioning at the time.
You could note in the IEP notes that you've had the discussion about the transfer of rights. However, I would use that in the PWN
I think the
because
question
it
came-
is a requirement of IDEA that happen. So did you have a question, John?
No, just to clarify, I think the
Mhm.
question came up when we were talking about if the parent brings a outside agency to the meeting, and you asked the general question of everybody, where should that where do we document that? And
Mhm.
and the response was in the PWN or in the notes section.
And for documentation of the transfer of rights as well. Supplementary aids and services. I just put this slide in here because I experienced this with students. They must align with the supplementary aids and services must align with the support that the student receives every day in the classroom. So that means the statewide assessment, like the ACT, if that's still being used. If you are applying for accommodations and supports for that assessment, they must match what is in the IEP. That is a common reason that supports will be not approved for a student is if there isn't evidence in the IEP that the student needs them to access the general curriculum and participate in education in the school. Does that make sense? I've heard that before. People are like, well, they always get denied and it's like, well, they will if you're not backing it up. If the IEP doesn't support what you're asking for, there's a chance they will be denied. So just a hot tip. IEP approval. Here's another one that can shock parents. When a student turns 18, we talked about the transfer of rights, they are legally considered an adult and they must sign their own IEP. Unless there's a guardian or something else in effect, if the student is 18, and then they have the responsibility to sign their own IEP regardless of the severity of their disability. They are taking over the responsibility of making decisions regarding their education, including any changes to their special education services instead of their parents, unless the parent has established legal guardianship through the court system. But I really don't want you to take away from this that parents should try to get guardianship. Like that is really something, there's lots of other alternatives to guardianship. There's lots of supports. And Carrie, I think, got that link in there that is a great resource to share with your families regarding this.
So the student, like I have one turning 18, but we had his IEP now. He doesn't sign it, but if we had it after his birthday,
Yes,
he needs to sign it.
that is
Oh,
correct.
I'm gonna have a couple of those. And I had one last year and I didn't do that. I did not know that.
Ronnie, moving forward, just all you can do is moving forward, do the best you can. But now you know, and knowing is half the battle, right?
Yeah.
Here we have some changes on the upcoming document for high school graduation. This section is to be completed during the student's senior year. The intent of this section is to document if the student will graduate with a regular diploma, return to receive special education services next year, or if they are aging out before meeting graduation requirements. What this section is not this section doesn't determine if a student graduates, right? You don't check the box and now they're going to graduate and we don't have to do anything else. No, this is just really triggers the school district's need to provide prior written notice, because when a student graduates with a regular diploma or ages out, they are no longer eligible to receive special education services. So this box is intended to be a trigger for the team to have this discussion and to make sure to provide the parents with prior written notice. And I do have guidance. I do have an example of what to include in the PWN when it relates to aging out or graduating with a regular diploma.
But
Oh, and I should mention, so what you see here is the box from the Montana Transition IEP, and you see the bottom box in yellow has been crossed out, and the red box is the language change that is expected to happen in Infinite Campus. So right now you see the boxes, the original 3 boxes. It will change to the information that's in the red box, just box 3. And I will read to you what the difference is. The original language says, the district will not provide special education services for the next school year due to the district's policy on the age through which educational services are available. This has changed. Can anybody tell me what changed?
They can stay in school until they're what, 21 or 22?
22. So
Right.
the change is it's not due to district policy anymore. Now that's statewide.
Okay.
So we removed, that's what's different about this box. We're removing the language due to district policy.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that was a problem. I come from Texas. We didn't have this problem, so.
Key points. The box must be addressed and completed during the student's senior year. It's important that we wait until the senior year because, again, the intent of the box is to trigger the PWN, okay? It includes students who will graduate with a regular diploma, will return for an additional year, or will age out. If a student is going to graduate early, treat that as their senior year. Because again, remember, we're triggering the need for the prior written notice. So if they're going to graduate early, the parents still need notice that the student's eligibility will end upon receiving a regular high school diploma. If a student is returning for an additional year, treat each additional year as an additional senior year. So you'll address the box every year. Make sense? And here we go. If graduating with a regular diploma or aging out, the PWN, and I'm going to show you that. But first, let's talk about why. Why do we have to have a PWN? Graduation is a change in placement, and graduation with a regular high school diploma again triggers that end to the eligibility to receive special education services. The definition of a regular high school diploma, that is the standard diploma awarded to the majority of students in the state. It is fully aligned with state academic standards. It's not based on alternate academic achievement standards, and it doesn't include like a GED or a certificate of completion or attendance or any lesser credential. If the student receives any of those credentials, they still are entitled to receive special education services. The purpose of the PWN is to ensure that the family is formally informed that graduation changes the student's placement, and it provides documentation of the change in a legal and educational status. Key takeaway is graduation with a regular diploma is legally significant, and the PWN ensures compliance with clear communication and with our families. And this is available for you on the OPI website. If anyone wants to throw a link to this document in the chat, I see some of my friends out there who know where to find this. This prior written notice example is just that. It's just examples of the kind of information to include. And I've gone through each of the boxes of the PWN and provided information that you can use, and make sure that, use this as a guide, but make sure that it's specific to your student. Also note that there are 3 checkboxes on that high school graduation form. And if you look here, there's often 3 examples in a box, but those boxes don't necessarily align, or those examples don't necessarily align to like box 1, box 2, box 3. Make sense? Okay. Any questions on the high school graduation PWN? Was that new information for anyone? Yes? Okay. It is 5:17. Here I have for you some additional resources. We already talked about the Montana Youth Transition Conference that is in November. That's a really good one. We have our special education guidance book for Montana. And there are some great online courses that you can take through. I didn't write down where these were from. Sorry, guys, I have to open the link, which we'll just go for it. Here we go. Iris Center has really fantastic courses on secondary transition. And they aren't very long, and they really provide a lot of information. There's one on interagency collaboration if you are wondering how to go about working with outside agencies, and fundamentals of transition planning. This one is extended. If anyone needs some CEUs, that's extensive ones. Fundamentals of transition planning for creating high quality transition plans. It is really substantial coursework. It does say that it takes 10 hours to complete the course, but I didn't find that it took that long. But this is a really great comprehensive course that's free. And like John said, we like free. There's also a course for school counselors, facilitating transitions for students with disabilities. If you are a high school counselor, if you work with one you enjoy, this would be a good one to share with them. Here we are for questions. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I will be out of the office for a couple weeks, but if you send me an email by tomorrow, I will do my best to get that information out to you ASAP tomorrow or Saturday morning. Or I will respond to your email when I return October 20th. Any questions? If this was helpful for you, would you throw a line in the chat and tell me what you gained from today? Because that's really helpful for me when I'm planning presentations in the future, and I know what worked, what was new information, what you would like to know more about. That's all very helpful. On that note, here is the evaluation that I promised you.
Desiree, there was one in the chat. I don't know if it got answered about if the CEUs from Iris would be accepted by OPI.
That is, I
don't-
think that's a district. Is that a district thing, John?
The continuing ed units from Iris would, that is not our determination there. I think that would have to be through the certification department, licensure specifically, to ask if that is acceptable or if that can be transferred over to a CEU certificate.
So, John, are special education directors allowed to determine some of those things too, though? Like what they want to use for PD?
I don't know that. I do
Okay.
not know.
That's it's a great question, and I certainly would be happy to look into that.
We had one comment here, Desiree, from Kelsey, she'd like more examples of transition services needed, if possible. Primarily focused, I think, and then TM followed up with different levels of ability, what would be appropriate based upon the ability levels of the student.
It really depends on what the identified needs are. And what the plan is for the student after they graduate. So it's really identifying, okay, here's where they're at now. Here are some things that we can provide instruction on or supports, experiences that the student can have that would help them make progress towards their post-secondary goals. So it's kind of hard to give like a one size fits all or a this would work for everyone. It is intended to be very unique. So if you have a specific student that you have questions on, if you want to email me, I would be happy to help you with that.
And also that MCIS program is a good one to kind of tailor. There are a series of assessments that are available in that program that can be tailored to the individual student's ability levels. And I think that's mcis.org, but I'm not 100% on that. Anybody
Are you
know?
talking about the Montana Career Information System?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that mcis.org?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Dana says that, or Deanna says that she, knowing that evaluations are needed for each area of transition planning is super helpful. I've been scrambling to know what goes in where sometimes. Yeah, aren't we all sometimes?
Well, I think that once you kind of have a picture of how the sections fit together, and it's that it can be very like logical. Like, okay, we start with what the student wants to do, and then we take a look at what are the student's strengths in that area. What what are their needs? Like we just start gathering all of the assessment data to put in there to determine like, here's where we're at now, and here's how we can help the student get to where they want to be. Does that make sense? That the results guide, based on the results and the information that we've gathered, we take that and we determine what an appropriate measurable post-secondary goal is. And now we have a goal that's aligned with what they want to do. And from there, like, how do we help the student achieve those goals or make reasonable progress towards those goals? And there we have our transition services needed. We make sure that we're addressing the needs that we determined in the results of transition assessment.
And Jillian had provided there at the end of in the chat, she had provided the link again to the transition binder. And within that binder is where you find the PWN samples that Desiree alluded to earlier. So there's the link for it there. I think it's posted a couple of times in this chat.
So if I have more questions, I can just email you and ask you, because I'm totally new to writing these
Yes.
IEPs. Like I told John last year, I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. So this transition part, I got good at the other part. Now I need this part.
All right, Ronnie, you are ready to become a superstar of the transition IEP, which is really what I hope for all of you. So please do reach out to me if you have questions. I do my best to get back to you as promptly as possible. I know that sometimes it can be difficult to come up with some of this stuff on our own, and it's fun to bounce ideas off of somebody else. So if I can be a part of your team, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to help.
I have two very difficult ones. I've already done one, and I know I kind of messed up on it, but I have one coming up on the other, and the mom is very involved. So I'm going to need a lot of help.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, Ronnie. As I've told you
Absolutely.
before.
I mean,
Desiree, there's one
okay.
other question that was posted here in the transition portion where we list the plan. This is from TM. Then the person's responsible portion of that, what should the timeline be listed as? Is it as an annual IEP, but we want to make sure the timeline we want to make the timeline for that portion be on the current IEP meeting, or is it an ongoing to graduation?
When we look at the transition services needed, if it doesn't, I mean, there's two things you can do. So you can identify like what year the student will do that. And some people choose to do that. Like if you know that there's an assessment that they're going to take the junior year, you're looking forward to that information, you can identify in the student's junior year, they will take the ASVAB, for example. However, if you don't have those on there, we're looking at what is going to be completed in the upcoming year during that annual IEP. Does that make sense? So unless you note it otherwise, the expectation is that's happening within the IEP that is being developed.
And then there's another question. How do the transitions look for students in a residential facility?
They look like transition IEPs.
Still has to be done. Yeah.
What that,
was
I mean,
me.
again, it
I need to
really,
clarify a little bit.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Because that was my question. So for a lot of mine, when I say like who's responsible for something, I'll put youth staff or something like that, because that's our facility. But sometimes they're only here for 2 or 3 days and they go. So it's hard to know if I should keep, people responsible as staff, or because I don't have parents. Sometimes the social workers aren't even here. It's really hard.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, are you writing IEPs for students who are not staying with you very long? Is that correct? Okay.
It could be anywhere from a few days to a few months. We never know.
Yes, that's a big uniques. Those are unique situations.
Yeah.
And really, so when you're doing the transition planning, you're still working with the student and the student's like future plans, right? So, and that future plan is going to go beyond what 3 days from now or 3 months from now are. So it's just trying to put that information together with fidelity to support the student, right? But you're right. Some of those, like I I think identifying the position of a staff person, and if they're working, like just identifying the position so that then that could change, with them if they went to a different location. Really the types of activities and instruction that the student could benefit from receiving. But
Okay.
you won't be able to, yeah, I see what you're saying about the accountability and the responsibility piece. But wherever the student transfers to, then the next district would accept that IEP or amend it.
Okay, thank you.
And
Great questions.
I'm not seeing any other questions other than thank yous. So
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate this a lot. So it's good to get feedback and see where the needs are. So please do send me your questions if you've got some, and if I can help you, please let me
Hey,
know.
Des. Hi, this is Ann. I just want to
Mhm.
remind everybody, if you did not receive a certificate and you had attended previous sessions, that means I didn't get your evaluation, and we're using the same evaluation. You just mark whatever date you attend. But I will have to have an evaluation from the session you attend in order to create and email out the PDU. So if you haven't received one and you attended like the September 11th one, please go back in and fill in the evaluation for that session. It's okay because I can see the dates and times of what sessions and things like that. But last time we had a little craziness with our attendance going from Zoom to Teams. And so if I missed you, please do that evaluation and I'll be sure to send out a certificate.
Thank you, Anne. And again, I'm looking at the comments in the chat. If you would like information from me, if there's something that I can get to you, whether more examples or ideas, please feel free to email me at desiree.johnson or desiree.johnson@mt.gov. I'll put that in there, or I'll put that in the chat for you.
already
And
did it.
all right, thank you. Well, I appreciate you guys. If you've got a question you want to stay on, great. If not, however I can help, let me know.
I had one quick question, Desiree. So when I've been writing the measurable goals, I've been putting them as like student